Good evening. We are speaking with Nalaka Gunawardene, the director of TVE Asia Pacific and, might I add, a very well-read blogger as well. And those are two aspects, Nalaka, that I'd probably like to flesh out a bit more as we go on in our conversation. But I would like to start on your association, and a very interesting one at that, with Arthur C. Clarke. You've written about it quite extensively after his passing away, and you have also written a very poignant essay to Ground Views last year on his death anniversary. What was it? Who was the man, really? Because some of us only know him through Fountains of Paradise or through his literature, compelling stuff, certainly. But tell us about the man himself.
Well, he was a man of many parts and larger than life. I had the rare privilege of being closely associated with him in the last 20 years of his life as a research assistant, which basically meant I had to dig up information. I had to also assist him in his work of fiction, non-fiction, as well as the engagement he had with the media and the scientific communities worldwide. The man at a personal level was always very stimulating, great fun. He had an ego, but I think of all people on this planet, he was entitled to his big ego. And it was the irreverent take that he had on men and matters and the world and the universe, which was perhaps the most endearing quality in him to me. He believed that no subject was too serious that you can't make fun of it.
Which is a good lesson in the context that we are living in.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I want to also talk about one idea of his, the space elevator, which occurs or is to be found in the only book that is located in Sri Lanka, though not in the same Sri Lanka as you and I inhabit, a fictional Sri Lanka, in the Fountains of Paradise. Now, this, some scientists, I think last year I seem to have read somewhere that they're seriously considering the space elevator idea as something that's doable, but it's certainly not the first idea of Clarke that has gone from science fiction to science fact. Did you have a lot of discussions on those ideas that he wrote into his books and also to his serious articles?
Yes, I mean, he had this amazing ability to pull in diverse information, very hardcore technical information, as well as sometimes evolving discussions in the scientific community, and process that into engaging fiction as well as engaging non-fiction essays and commentary. And the idea of the space elevator, in fact, goes back to the 1960s. It was originally proposed by a Russian engineer called Yuri Astutanov, who first thought of the idea. It was published in a Russian journal in Russian language, and
obscure,
then it was obscure. Right. And then a few years later, the Americans discovered it. But it still stayed within the realm of technical engineering discussions. And then in 1979, Sir Arthur wrote The Fountains of Paradise, where he took this idea and used it as one of the core elements in the novel, loosely based in a futuristic Sri Lanka.
Yeah. Closer to the equator as well.
Closer, in fact, straddling the
equator.
Equator. And he, for the first time, popularized the concept of the space elevator to the wider world. So he took it beyond the technical circles.
A more serious question, Alec. I mean, Sir Clarke's legacy is over a corpus of literature, perhaps the best science fiction that you can find, Asimov and that genre. But when you take Sri Lankan science fiction or Sri Lankan science writing even, you don't find that quality. Why is that?
Well, to begin with, we have to acknowledge that Sri Lankan science itself is not of that quality, because science writers are, especially if you look at publishing in the media, is concerned, science writers reflect what is happening in the scientific community and the interface between science and society. So when there is very limited scientific productivity, creativity in the country, I think that also reflects in the quality of science writing as well as the volume or the quantity of science writing.
Does it affect also the ability to envision science as well? Is that why science fiction as a genre of literature is non-existent? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there are tentative attempts to come up with original science fiction. by Sri Lankan writers, and I'm familiar with both those who write in English as well as in Sinhala. Unfortunately, I'm not able to follow what's happening in Tamil, and perhaps that's happening in Tamil as well. But I mean, I could just with the fingers on my two hands, I can say that there are so few writers who even attempt tentatively to write science fiction. There are a few more writing science fact or scientific commentary, myself included, and I've been trying to do this for the past 20 years or so. But the subject matter and the stage in which we can attempt this is very, very limited. So that's one of the inherent challenges, and I think this is set to change, especially with the emergence of new media and what is local, what is global anymore. You know, where do you draw the line? So science being a global enterprise, I think the one way Sri Lankan science writers can find their feet is to go beyond this island. In fact, that's something I've been trying to do, you know, go beyond the island mentality and engage the world.
I think you opened up a lot of issues there. And David Blacker, writing in the Times of India day before yesterday, noted among many other points he was making that the war mentality that we have been under for nearly 3 decades now has killed Sri Lankan literature. And he was speaking specifically about fiction. But could it be also argued that you say the lack of scientific development, or indeed the lack of development writ large, has it killed our ability to interrogate ourselves as a polity and society? Do you feel, as writers, as people who, whatever media, mainstream media, new media?
Yeah, I think what's happened is the space, the public sphere or the public space where we can argue, we can come and bring out a multiplicity of ideas. You know, that space has been shrinking, and there has been this terrible polarization that if you're not with me, you must be against me, you should be shouted down or worse. You know, that scares a lot of practitioners, a lot of writers, both creative and otherwise, non-fiction. It also prevents or intimidates others, including young writers or older writers who want to get into this public sphere. So there is that vacuum, and it's been created or fueled by the conflict in part, but partly it's also there are other forces, you know, forces of nationalism which lay dormant and then have risen their ugly, terrible head in the wake of the conflict. I think these forces predate the conflict and perhaps triggered the conflict in the first place. But that all these factors detract from that marketplace of ideas where you can argue out, counter-argue, and basically agree to disagree. And that space is not there, and therefore the writing is that much purified.
I want to come at that from 2 angles. One is that I've read your writing on your blog. Now, you write prolifically on your blog, much more than I believe you publish in print, or as much. Now, that's atypical still for many journalists in Sri Lanka, who still are chained to a mainstream media broadcast paradigm, where, you know, which is not the same, or is certainly the world has evolved from those old understandings and definitions of broadcast media. What made you change? What made you realize that the media as we have grown up with has changed?
Well, when I started writing for a living in the Sri Lankan mainstream media in the late 80s, the internet was not commercially available or accessible in this country. In fact, nowhere else in the world.
Exactly.
So things have changed so much in the past 20 or so years. But why I took to blogging just a little under 2 years ago in early 2007 was that I found that more and more I was unable to express myself in the so-called mainstream media. Or I was being asked to be careful, I was being asked to be respectful of certain limits, and after a while I thought, you know, I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to be my own publisher. And the web allows, especially Web 2.0, the technologies and platforms like blogging allow us to be our own publishers. And so I became one.
So